gospel can do this for me. It can make me to know that there is a living God.
He was sent by his local physician with a history of being tired and not eating good. And a bone marrow test was done at that time, which gave the diagnosis of acute leukemia.
Oh, it scared me to death. I thought the world had come to an end.
And I told him I felt like it would be better if Darren went to a cancer research center for treatment.
So everything is all right, huh? With you, huh? You feel all right today? Okay. You want to breathe deep for me? He came here immediately before any treatment, and we confirmed the diagnosis.
And they made some few tests themselves, and they decided that definitely he had leukemia.
Now up.
Once St. Jude's starts their initial treatment and puts them into remission or gets their leukemia under control, then they send them back to the referring physician like myself. And we see these patients on once-a-week basis to give them their IV medication. Darren is doing exceptionally well. He's been in a remission from his leukemia, or has had no evidence of leukemia now for nearly 3 years. Oh, don't fuss. You've had this done to you 1,000 times. Here lately, I believe he's getting somewhat tired of getting poked with needles.
So it's been, what, 3 years now, right? Well, we decided that it is the right time to stop the chemotherapy. So from now on, no more drugs, no more shots. What about that? No more shots.
In 1946, when the first chemotherapeutic agent was discovered that was effective in leukemia, children could be expected to live approximately 2 or 3 months with the disease. In the more recent study, it looks as if we're going to have a 50% 5-year leukemia-free remission rate. But of course, we all hope that the cause of the disease will be defined and that we will be able to prevent it, because that's the best treatment of all. It's a very beautiful time to be in this field because we can see a big light at the end of the tunnel, finally.
Tonight we're going to talk about hope. And we're going to talk about the progress we've already made against cancer. And about the progress we can hope for in the very near future.
There's always hope.
I can quite honestly have a very much more optimistic attitude than ever before.
It's very optimistic.
It certainly is hopeful.
The doctor fighting cancer today has 3 principal weapons: surgery, radiotherapy, and treatment by drugs, or chemotherapy.
These 3 fields of surgery, radiotherapy, and chemotherapy should be available to every patient on the day that there's a suspicion that cancer is present, before the diagnosis is actually made. And with all these experts representing these several kinds of treatment areas, there should be a decision made by all of them as to what is best for each particular patient, and what the second line of treatment should be if the first fails, and what the third should be. In other words, this is the era of an interdisciplinary approach. This is no longer a field for the treatment of one patient by one doctor by any one method of treatment.
At first, doctors used only single drugs, one at a time, to treat cancer. This was because there were very few drugs that were active. But as the national program has produced more and more drugs that are highly active against cancer, it has been possible to combine at first 2, and now in some of our most successful instances, the use of a combination of 4 drugs given over relatively long periods of time.
Is it good?
15 years ago, virtually no cancers were controllable by drugs. At the present time, The list is about 12 to 15.
We started Mr. Gray's treatment in December, and you had 6 courses of chemotherapy.
Yes.
There were 3 or 4 drugs. I think it was 3 drugs every 3 weeks.
Every 3 months, yes.
Having completed the drug therapy, we're now starting on the radiation therapy to the residual disease. Hodgkin's disease is particularly sensitive to radiation. It used to be considered a fatal disease, but the improvement in the control and in the cure of Hodgkin's disease has been really dramatic. It has improved greatly during the past 5 years because we have better drugs and better combinations of drugs. And we often combine the drug therapy and radiation therapy. This patient has an 80 to 90% chance of being cured.
I'm Marlo Thomas, and I'm at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. And this is Marty. Marty is 10 years old, and he lives in Memphis.
Well, his symptoms were being very tired. He bruised very easily. And we noticed a difference in his walking pattern.
He was 4 years old.
He told us that he thought it was leukemia.
Well, I think it was 7 years when we started coming, and I'm coming every 3 months now.
It's something you always think happens to someone else rather than you. And I guess it was probably the saddest day in our lives.
The first part of the treatment, one drug, prednisone, was given orally, and vincristin was given weekly in the vein.
It was in one of these bottles that they stuck you in a vein in your arm and put this. It was I'm not real sure what the name of it was.
The first treatment was the use of 2 drugs, prednisone and vincristin, which was to get him into remission. And as I recall, it took 19 days.
Now, at 2 or 3 months interval, he had a spinal tap and bone marrow aspiration.
Well, every 6 months they give this one certain test
to detect any leukemic activity in the body.
It feels kind of like when a wasp stings you or something.
After 2 years, since he maintained his initial remission, we decided to stop his treatment. Now just take a deep breath. Yeah, his spleen is not palpable. Very good. Don't move your head now. Just stay still. The bone marrow is normal, the spinal fluid is clear, and the blood count is normal. You don't take any medicine. You just go and do whatever you want. If you want to go camping, you go ahead and do it. If you like to swim, you do it. You can do whatever you want because your condition is perfect.
There were 7 boys taken off at the same time that Marty was taken off, and this was the first that had been removed from drugs.
I've been off medicine for 5 years now.
Dr. Donald Pinkle is the medical director of St. Jude's. Dr. Pinkle, would you tell us about the first time you took a leukemia patient off treatment?
Well, we had several children who had been in complete remission, free of all evidence of leukemia for 3 or 4 years. And it was a new experience for us. We knew that if we stopped treatment and they weren't cured, that their leukemia would relapse and they would die of their leukemia. So I saw one young child and spoke to the mother and explained to her that I was not certain that her child was cured of leukemia and that it might only be suppressed, but that I felt that we had to remove these drugs from the child in order to ascertain whether he was cured or not. The mother cried, and I went off afterwards alone, and I cried a little myself, but we stopped the drugs, we stopped the treatment. And that child now is completely free of all leukemia and is a healthy child. And there are many others like him.
Well, I play on a baseball team and I like to fish. The only thing I've come close to catching today has been a turtle.
Was Marty one of the first patients?
Yes, he was one of the first 5 that we took off of treatment.
And has he had any recurrence?
None.
Well, our last ball game, we got beat 9-1. It was our first game because our other one got rained out. We didn't do real good on our hitting.
He is not unusual. He is one type of patient who is going to be seen more and more often.
Marty has been in fine health, enjoying normal growth, normal development.
Just as normal as any boy.
There's one more, Marty. One more.
That's it, come on, Brian!
Well, I feel real good.
When I was a medical student more than 45 years ago, we were saving only 1 out of 6, or 1 out of 5, patients with malignant cancers. Today we are saving 1/3 of all patients with all kinds of malignant cancer. And this number could be very much greater.
The whole thing is early detection and early treatment.
I'm Ann Baxter, and I'm in the office of Dr. Jane Wright in New York City. Dr. Wright, what is the purpose of a pap test?
The purpose of taking a pap test is to detect cancer of the mouth of the uterus at its earliest stage.
If one has a pap test and cancer is detected, what is then the treatment?
You are then treated either by surgery or by radiotherapy. If the disease is caught at its very earliest stage,
yes,
it can be cured in 100% of the population.
Isn't that marvelous? Yeah. Wow, I didn't know it was 100%.
In those areas of the country where women have the pap test performed routinely once or twice per year, the mortality rate from carcinoma of the cervix has been reduced by 50%.
50%?
Now, the incidence of cancer of the cervix is the same. It is the 3rd leading cancer in women, but the mortality rate has been reduced because it is being detected at earlier stages.
Where women will take their pap test.
Will take their pap test.
Then there's just nothing to do but have
a pap test. Right.
Exactly.
I'm Dionne Warwick, and I'm in Dr. Max Cutler's office. Dr. Cutler, which cancer is the cause of most of the deaths in women today?
Cancer of the breast.
Is there a test like the pap test that can be taken to catch it early?
Mammography, which is examination of the breast with X-rays, X-ray pictures of the breast, is comparable to the pap smear in that it aims to detect cancers that are too small to be felt on a clinical examination.
I see.
It takes about 30 minutes.
Is there something I can do, like to see if it's there or to prevent it, or should I go to a doctor, or what is the usual procedure?
Some women find it acceptable to examine their own breasts and own self-examination.
And it's to your advantage to know things ahead of time. There's a very big emotional problem, and you'd rather not know the bad news and just pretend it's all good,
8 out of 10 operations that a surgeon does on the breast, that I do on the breast, are benign lesions, not cancer. So that the odds are in favor of getting good news. And of course, if the cancer is early and has not yet reached the glands under the arm, there's an 80% chance of cure. Early detection is crucially important until such time as we can prevent the disease. It's the only thing.
In identifying factors which cause cancer, we ought to be able to prevent it. Cancer is not our inherent birthright simply because we're people. This comes from many studies which show that up to 95% of our cancers are extrinsic. That is, they're not due to our inheritance or to our genetics. They're due to something that happens, something that we're exposed to.
1 out of every 4 or 5 men that work in a plant like this will die with cancer. It's true that that won't happen until they're in their 50s, their 60s, or their 70s perhaps. But we have to certainly take into consideration the possibility that there are things here in their work life that increase their risk of the disease.
Blow. Blow it all the way out. Blow, blow,
The
blow,
test
blow,
being performed here is a test which will show a loss of pulmonary ventilatory capability as a result of the long-term contamination of the lung with such particles as, for example, silicon particles, which are a known specific cause of one particular kind of lung cancer. Now, if the industrial environment is putting in chemical agents which cause cancer, then if we can identify these and eliminate them, we can produce a very substantial reduction in the tumor incidence in this country.
In general, in the Northeast and the Great Lakes sections, death rates are high for cancer, and they're low elsewhere.
And if we can find clues in the environment in these sections of the country, then we can find clues to controlling the environment, toward eliminating those things that are cancer-causing in the rest of the United States.
This is a map that shows, instead of where death rates are high, where they're rising rapidly and where they're rising slowly. And they're rising slowly in this area up here and rapidly down here, so that the rates are coming together over time. One of the most interesting general ideas from these trends over time is that if those tumors that are related to smoking, a very, very simple habit, were eliminated, that is, if the habit were eliminated, that for all race sex groups, males, females, whites, non-whites, cancer would be actually dropping, and that the reason we're looking at an epidemic-sized problem to the major extent is related to one habit, so smoking.
How'd you find out you had cancer?
Well, my wife had talked me into getting yearly checkups at Scripps Clinic, and I went down there for my usual checkup, and they found it in time. Now, if I hadn't been doing that year in and year out, they probably wouldn't have found it in time.
How'd you feel when they told you you had it?
Well, it was just like somebody hits you in the belly with a iron pipe. You don't believe it at first. It's a kind of a shock. And then you settle down to find out what your chances are.
Do you ever have a feeling of hopelessness in the beginning?
No, I didn't. My hardest decision was how to tell my family, and then whether or not to allow it to become public. And I think I chose the right way.
Why did you allow it to become public?
Well, I figured that if one person could get any value out of the fact that I had been saved by having a checkup in time, that it'd be worthwhile.
Are you cured now?
I guess I am. I've been doing a full day's work for a full day's pay.
Were you a heavy smoker?
Yes.
Are you now?
No, sir.
What do you think your chances would have been if you'd had the same cancer, say, 15 or 20 years ago?
Well, I just wouldn't be out here riding around these hills.
Why not?
I'd be dead.
How did a few years make the difference?
Because the research that they have done in the last few years has given many people a chance to live.
But with all the successes, the job is far from being done. The work goes on in hospitals and laboratories all over the country.
Cancer is a very broad category of disease, just like infection is a category of disease. No one, I think, would lump a boil or a pimple with a pneumonia, and yet they are both infections. The treatment of one is far more difficult and dangerous than that of the other. And similarly, when we succeed in making an advance for a particular cancer, this is not a sweeping advance that applies to all cancers. It means we have to start all over again the next day to begin work on the next type of cancer.
These are human cancer cells, alive, dividing, multiplying. Normal cells grow. They do their work, they die, and then are replaced by orderly cell division. Cancer cells, on the other hand, divide very rapidly and without order. They crowd out the normal cells and keep them from doing their job. And the cancer cells travel, metastasize is the medical term. They spread through the body, finally overwhelming a vital organ, causing death. It starts with a single cell, which somehow becomes cancerous and divides. Then the two cells divide, and so on. Often by the time the cancer is detected, so many divisions have taken place that it's too late for help.
It is not the treatments that we know to be effective that offers the hope for me. It is the treatments that I know are going to be developed while the person I'm treating has his illness. That has to be improved, you see, as long as we stay on it. The white blood cells are the important cells in protecting an individual against infection, particularly in patients with cancer and patients who are getting chemical treatment for their cancer. The white blood count tends to be depressed as a side effect. If we can replace the white blood cells by transfusion, we can help them get more therapy for their cancer, and in addition, we can prevent these unpleasant infections. The technology for this instrument has a long way to go in development. This is, in my eyes, the Model T.
New methods of treatment. For example, what if cancer were caused by a virus? If a virus can be isolated, it can sometimes be controlled by a vaccine.
Since about 1900, we've come to recognize about 110 different viruses which are capable of causing cancer in virtually every major group of laboratory and domestic animals. Now, based on this information, we've been able to isolate 4 different types of viruses directly from human cancers. Type C particles, the type being examined in the scope at the present time, are those which are associated predominantly with leukemias, lymphomas, and sarcomas of children. Our difficult task now is to acquire the kind of information which is necessary to try to relate a particular virus isolated from human cancer to the causation of that cancer. This is the National Cancer Institute's Virus Isolation Facility. In it, approximately 100 investigators are conducting studies designed to determine which viruses are capable of causing cancer in man. What we're shooting for, obviously, is to try to determine whether vaccines similar to that which prevents polio can be used. There are many problems here. One of the most important, for instance, is that it really took only about 1 summer to determine whether we had the right vaccine for the prevention of polio. With cancer, it would take at least 5 years, and in many cases more, to find out whether the child vaccinated against, let's say, leukemia, was in fact protected against leukemia.
There are many questions still to be answered. And one of the most interesting is simply this. Why doesn't everybody get cancer?
Why doesn't everybody develop cancer? Well, this is not an unusual thing, because in our animals, as in man, only about 20% of individuals develop cancer in their lifetime. This particular mouse is a resistant mouse. On the other hand, this mouse is very susceptible to cancer and is one of the, let us say, 20% of mice that would develop cancer. And you can see that when it was injected with a chemical which produces cancer very rapidly, it has developed cancer. Now, in this case, the mouse was also injected, you see, with the same chemical, and it has not developed cancer. Nature is doing an excellent job, not good enough by any means, of protecting us against cancer during large parts of our early life, and actually is protecting as many as 4 out of 5 people who do not die of cancer. So our whole purpose is to find out, if we can, and we have a pretty good idea what we want to do and what to look for, to find out what it is that nature is doing. We want to help her.
Patients with cancer do respond immunologically to their disease. In other words, the body recognizes its own cancer cells as foreign and attempts to reject them. What we want to do, of course, is to find ways to understand how the body defends itself against cancer, and then to use this information to control the disease. There are a number of promising leads. One that intrigues us has to do with substances that have the capacity to induce a general heightening of the immune reaction. We've known for some time that mice injected with products isolated from bacteria or from yeast are far more resistant than normal animals to the growth and development of cancer. What we now need to find out is how to achieve the same thing in man.
It's the type of work in which doctors must be attuned to being patient and to working for many, many years to see their results. But the fact is the results are emerging, and cure rates today are so far ahead of those of 10 or 15 or 20 years ago that there's literally no comparison.
It was after it was gone that they told me that it actually was cancer.
I was scared.
My heart
St.
Discovered it in 1964.
It was in 1962.
It's been over 10 years.
Oh, about 9 years ago.
Feel fine.
Great.
Oh, I feel that I'm cured. If I get cancer now, I think it'll be from some other source, not the same.
Never found anything since.
No recurrence whatsoever.
I had a sister-in-law that died of cancer.
I had an uncle that passed away with the same thing.
I think more people died of cancer then than they do now.
I don't feel 20 years or 15 years before my surgery there would have been nearly the chance that I had.
It might not have come out quite as fortunately for me.
Treatments have been improved.
They have more cures, more discoveries, research always working.
It's shocking when you hear about it, but there's always hope.
No, I don't feel it's hopeless. No, not now. A lot of people get cured. A lot of people.
You know, there was a time not so long ago when the diagnosis of cancer was literally a death sentence. But that's no longer true. As you've seen tonight, cancer is not a hopeless disease. We are making progress against cancer. But for many who are sick and who will be sick in the days to come, the progress we're making is not enough. We must do more. We must learn more. We must continue and increase our efforts. And God willing, we shall. Thank you, and good night.
Good night.
This year, more than 650,000 new cases of cancer will be diagnosed in the United States. This disease strikes everywhere, strikes all ages, strikes in many forms. We are committed to fight against cancer. We've committed our resources, human and financial, to put an end to cancer. And that commitment may possibly be the most difficult our nation has ever made, and the most important.
For information about cancer and about doctors and hospitals near you participating in National Cancer Institute programs, write Cancer, National Cancer Institute, Bethesda, Maryland, 20014.